The mountain air was crisp and thin as Sarah Mitchell adjusted her medical kit one more time. She had been working as a civilian medical assistant at the remote observation post for 8 months now, and the routine had become as familiar as breathing. Every morning at 6, she would climb the rocky path to reach the military outpost perched high on the mountainside, where soldiers kept watch over the valley below. Sarah was 24 years old, with steady hands and a calm demeanor that made her perfect for emergency medical situations. She had volunteered for this assignment after finishing her paramedic training, wanting to serve her country in some way without actually joining the military. The pay was decent, and she felt useful helping the soldiers who risked their lives protecting the border. The observation post was called Eagle's Nest by everyone stationed there. It sat on a rocky outcrop that provided a perfect view of the entire valley and the mountain passes that led into neighboring territory. The post housed 12 soldiers at any given time, rotating every 3 months. They worked in shifts, constantly monitoring radio communications and scanning the horizon through high-powered telescopes and binoculars. Captain James Rodriguez had been the commanding officer for the past 6 weeks. He was a serious man in his early 30s, with dark hair that was always perfectly groomed and eyes that seemed to notice everything. Sarah had found him polite but distant during their few interactions. He treated her professionally, which she appreciated, though sometimes she caught him watching her work with an expression she couldn't quite read. The soldiers at Eagle's Nest were a mixed group. There was Sergeant Thompson, a veteran with 20 years of service who could fix almost anything with duct tape and determination. Private Martinez was barely 19, eager and nervous, always asking questions about everything. Corporal Johnson was the communications expert, spending most of his time hunched over radio equipment with headphones on. The others rotated through various duties, but all of them had become familiar faces to Sarah over the months. On this particular Tuesday morning, Sarah noticed something different in the air. The soldiers seemed more alert than usual, speaking in hushed tones and checking their equipment more frequently. She didn't think much of it at first. Military operations often involved information that civilians weren't privy to, and she had learned not to ask too many questions. The medical station where Sarah worked was a converted storage room in the main building. It contained basic emergency supplies, an examination table, and communication equipment to call for helicopter evacuation if someone was seriously injured. Most of her work involved treating minor cuts, checking blood pressure, and making sure the soldiers stayed healthy in the challenging mountain environment. Around 10 in the morning, Captain Rodriguez approached her station. His usual composed expression seemed slightly strained, and Sarah noticed he was carrying a detailed map of the surrounding area. "Miss Mitchell," he said formally, "we may need your medical services on standby today. Nothing specific, and just want to make sure you're prepared for any situation." Sarah nodded professionally. "Of course, Captain. Is there something I should know about?" Rodriguez hesitated for a moment, studying her face carefully. "We've received intelligence about possible hostile activity in the lower valley. It's probably nothing, but we're taking precautions." "I understand," Sarah replied, checking her medical kit to ensure everything was properly stocked. "I'll be ready." The captain lingered for a moment longer, as if he wanted to say something else, then simply nodded and walked away. Sarah watched him go, noting how his shoulders seemed tense beneath his uniform. As the morning progressed, the atmosphere at Eagle's Nest grew increasingly tense. The soldiers moved with purpose, checking weapons and adjusting equipment. Sarah could hear radio chatter from the communications room, though she couldn't make out the specific words. The tone was urgent and clipped, the kind of military communication that suggested something important was happening. Around noon, Sergeant Thompson approached her station. He was a gruff but kind man who had always been friendly to Sarah, often sharing stories about his family back home and asking about her life before coming to the mountain. "Doc, he said, using the nickname the soldiers had given her despite her protests that she wasn't actually a doctor. "You might want to stay close to the building today. Captain's orders." "Is there danger?" Sarah asked, though she tried to keep her voice casual. Thompson glanced around, then lowered his voice. "Intelligence suggests there might be sniper activity in the area. Could be nothing, but the captain doesn't want to take chances with civilian personnel." Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air. The idea of enemy snipers in the valley below made her stomach tighten with anxiety. She had signed up to help soldiers, not to be in direct danger herself. "How reliable is this intelligence?" she asked. "Reliable enough that we're taking it seriously," Thompson replied. "Just stay alert and keep your head down if you hear anything unusual." The afternoon passed slowly, with everyone at the post maintaining heightened vigilance. Sarah tried to focus on organizing her medical supplies and updating her patient logs, but her attention kept drifting to the windows and the valley below. The peaceful mountain landscape suddenly seemed full of potential threats. At 3 o'clock, Private Martinez burst into the medical station, his young face pale with excitement and fear. "Doc, Captain wants you in the command room immediately," he said, breathing hard as if he had run the entire way. Sarah's heart jumped. In 8 months at Eagle's Nest, she had never been called to the command room. That space was reserved for military operations and classified discussions. Whatever was happening must be serious. She followed Martinez through the narrow corridors of the outpost to a room she had only glimpsed through open doorways. The command room contained multiple radio units, computer screens, detailed maps of the region, and sophisticated monitoring equipment. Captain Rodriguez stood at the center, studying a large topographical map spread across a table. "Miss Mitchell," he said without looking up from the map, "I need to ask you some questions, and I need you to answer them completely honestly." "Of course, Captain," Sarah replied, though confusion was evident in her voice. Rodriguez finally looked at her, his dark eyes intense and searching. "How long have you been working at this post?" 8 months, sir. You have my employment records." "And during that time, have you had any contact with anyone outside of official channels?" Sarah frowned, not understanding where this was going. "I call my family twice a week on the approved communication schedule. I receive mail through the military postal system. I don't understand what you're asking." The captain studied her face carefully as if looking for signs of deception. "Have you ever provided information about this post to anyone? Details about our operations, personnel, schedules?" "Absolutely not," Sarah said firmly, feeling a flash of anger. "I signed confidentiality agreements. I would never compromise the security of this post or put these soldiers in danger." Rodriguez nodded slowly, but his expression remained troubled. "Someone has been providing intelligence about our activities to hostile forces, very specific intelligence that could only come from inside this post." Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. The implications were terrifying. If there was a spy at Eagle's Nest, everyone was in danger. The isolation of their position made them vulnerable, and betrayal from within could be catastrophic. "Sir, I swear to you, I have never disclosed any information about this post to anyone," she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I believe you," Rodriguez said after a long moment. "But the fact remains that someone has. We intercepted communications this morning that contained details about our patrol schedules and defensive positions, information that only someone stationed here could know." The weight of the situation settled over Sarah like a heavy blanket. She was trapped on a mountain with 12 soldiers, and one of them might be a traitor. The thought made her feel sick and afraid. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. "Now we find out who's been talking," Rodriguez replied grimly. "And we hope we figure it out before someone gets killed." As if summoned by his words, The sharp crack of a rifle shot echoed across the valley, followed immediately by the distinctive ping of a bullet hitting metal somewhere on the post. Everyone in the command room froze for a split second before training took over. "Sniper!" Rodriguez shouted into his radio. "All personnel take cover! Repeat, we have sniper fire from the valley!" Sarah dropped to the floor instinctively as more shots rang out, the bullets striking the building and ricocheting off rocks. Her medical training kicked in, and she began mentally preparing for wounded soldiers who would need immediate care. But as she lay on the cold floor of the command room, listening to the chaos erupting around the post, one terrifying question dominated her thoughts. Had the spy already provided the sniper with enough information to pick them off one by one? The shooting continued for several minutes, bullets striking the building at regular intervals. Sarah could hear soldiers shouting orders and taking defensive positions, but she couldn't see what was happening from her position on the floor. "Can you identify the shooter's position?" Rodriguez called out to someone on the radio. "Negative, sir. Muzzle flash appears to be coming from multiple locations in the tree line approximately 800 meters south-southwest," came the crackling response. "Return fire authorized. Try to suppress the shooter and give us time to identify their exact location." The sound of American weapons answering back filled the air, a steady rhythm of controlled bursts aimed at the valley below. Sarah had heard weapons training before, but this was different. This was real combat, and people were trying to kill each other. After what felt like hours, but was probably only 10 minutes, the shooting stopped. The silence that followed was almost worse than the gunfire, heavy with tension and the possibility that the sniper was simply repositioning for a better shot. "Report," Rodriguez commanded into his radio. "No casualties, sir," came Thompson's voice. "Building took multiple hits, but no personnel were struck. We laid down suppressing fire, but can't confirm if we hit the shooter. Maintain defensive positions. Nobody moves without my authorization." Rodriguez turned to Sarah, who was still lying on the floor. "Are you injured?" "No, sir," she replied, slowly sitting up. Her hands were shaking slightly, but she felt otherwise unharmed. "Good. I need you to be ready to treat wounded if this situation escalates. Can you get to your medical station safely?" Sarah nodded, though the thought of moving through the building while a sniper might be watching terrified her. "Yes, sir. Stay low and move quickly. Thompson will escort you." As if on cue, Sergeant Thompson appeared in the doorway, his rifle in hand and his expression grim. "Ready, Doc?" Sarah took a deep breath, gathered her courage, and prepared to make the short but potentially deadly journey back to her medical station. As she followed Thompson through the corridors, keeping low and moving as quickly as possible, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The spy among them had set something in motion, and she had a sinking feeling that the worst was yet to come. The afternoon sun was beginning to cast long shadows across the valley when they reached her medical station. Sarah immediately began checking her supplies and preparing for potential casualties, while Thompson positioned himself near the window to watch for any sign of the sniper. "Thompson," she said quietly as she worked, "do you really think one of us is providing information to the enemy?" The sergeant's weathered face was grim as he scanned the valley below. "Doc, in 20 years of military service, I've learned that people will surprise you, not always in good ways. But everyone here seems so dedicated, so professional." "That's what makes a good spy," Thompson replied. "They blend in, they earn trust, they wait for the right moment." Sarah shuddered at the thought. She had shared meals with these soldiers, treated their minor injuries, listened to their stories about home. The idea that one of them was betraying the others felt like a personal violation. "How will Captain Rodriguez figure out who it is?" "That's above my pay grade, Doc. But the captain's smart. If there's a traitor among us, he'll find them." As the day wore on and no further shots came from the valley, Sarah began to hope that maybe the sniper had withdrawn. Perhaps the return fire from the post had been effective, or maybe the shooter had accomplished whatever they had set out to do. But deep down, She suspected this was merely a pause in whatever larger plan was unfolding. Evening was approaching when Captain Rodriguez returned to her medical station. His face looked older than it had that morning, etched with the stress of command and the knowledge that someone under his authority was betraying them all. "Miss Mitchell," he said formally, "I need to inform you that we're implementing security protocols effective immediately. No one leaves the main building without authorization. All communications are suspended except for emergency military channels. And I'm afraid I have to ask you to submit to a search of your personal quarters and belongings." Sarah nodded, understanding the necessity even though it felt invasive. "Of course, Captain. Whatever you need to do. I want you to know that this isn't personal. Everyone on this post will be subject to the same procedures." "I understand, sir." As Rodriguez began methodically searching through her medical supplies and personal items, Sarah watched his face for any sign of what he might be thinking. His expression remained professionally neutral. But she caught glimpses of the strain he was under. Command was a heavy burden under normal circumstances, but dealing with potential treachery from within his own unit had to be almost unbearable. "Captain," she said quietly as he examined her communication device, "is there anything specific you're looking for?" He paused in his search and looked at her directly. "Any evidence of unauthorized communication, secret compartments in equipment, anything that seems out of place or unusual. And if you find evidence that someone is the spy," Rodriguez's expression hardened, "then we'll deal with that person according to military justice and the circumstances we're facing." The weight of those words settled over Sarah as she realized just how serious this situation had become. They were isolated on a mountain, potentially under siege, with a traitor among them. The normal rules and procedures that governed life at the post had been suspended, replaced by the harsh realities of survival and security. As night began to fall over Eagle's Nest, Sarah prepared for what she sensed would be a long and dangerous few days ahead. The question of who had fired that bullet from the valley was only part of a larger mystery that threatened all their lives. And somewhere among the soldiers she had come to trust and care about, an enemy was hiding in plain sight, waiting for the right moment to strike again. The night at Eagle's Nest passed without sleep for most of the personnel. Sarah had tried to rest in her small quarters, but every sound made her heart race. The building creaked and settled in the mountain wind, and each noise could potentially mask the approach of enemies or the movements of the traitor among them. At dawn, she was already dressed and checking her medical supplies when Private Martinez knocked on her door. His young face looked haggard, with dark circles under his eyes that suggested he hadn't slept either. "Doc, Captain wants to see you in the command room again," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Sarah followed him through corridors that felt different now, charged with suspicion and fear. The familiar faces of the soldiers she passed seemed foreign somehow, as if she was seeing them for the first time and wondering what secrets they might be hiding. Captain Rodriguez was standing over a table covered with photographs when she entered the command room. The images appeared to be surveillance photos taken with high-powered telescopes, showing various positions around the valley and mountainside. "Miss Mitchell," he said without looking up, "we've made some discoveries during the night that change everything." Sarah approached the table cautiously, her heart pounding. "What kind of discoveries?" Rodriguez picked up one of the photographs and handed it to her. It showed a section of the valley where trees provided cover, and Sarah could make out what appeared to be a camouflaged position with equipment that looked military in nature. "Our night vision equipment revealed that the sniper position from yesterday wasn't a single shooter," Rodriguez explained. "It's a full surveillance and reconnaissance team. They've been watching us for weeks, possibly months." The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. Months? The equipment visible in these photos would take considerable time to properly position and camouflage. This isn't a random attack or opportunistic shooting. This is a coordinated intelligence operation. Sarah studied the photograph more carefully, trying to understand what she was seeing. The hidden position was sophisticated, almost invisible to casual observation. How did you spot them? Thermal imaging during the night. Human body heat shows up clearly in the cold mountain air, even through camouflage. Rodriguez took the photo back and pointed to several other images. But here's what's really troubling. Look at these photos. The next set of images showed the Eagle's Nest post itself, but taken from the perspective of the hidden surveillance team. Sarah could see soldiers moving around the building, herself walking between locations, and detailed views of their defensive positions and daily routines. They've been documenting everything, Rodriguez continued grimly. Our patrol schedules, shift changes, meal times, communication procedures. They know more about our operations than some of our own personnel. How is that possible without inside help? Sarah asked, though she already knew the answer. It isn't. Someone has been providing them with information to supplement their surveillance, someone who knows details that can't be observed from the valley. Rodriguez moved to a different section of the table where he had laid out what appeared to be a timeline with names and activities marked at various points. Sarah could see her own name listed, along with those of all the soldiers stationed at the post. I've been analyzing everyone's activities, communications, and behavior patterns over the past several months, the captain explained, looking for anomalies, patterns, anything that might indicate who's been passing information. Have you found anything? Rodriguez's expression was troubled. Several possibilities, but nothing definitive yet. However, last night's surveillance photos revealed something interesting. He handed her another photograph, this one showing a figure near the edge of the post's perimeter during what appeared to be early morning hours. The image was grainy and taken from a distance, but clearly showed someone in military clothing positioned near the communication equipment housing. This photo was taken by the surveillance team at approximately 0300 hours yesterday morning, Rodriguez said. Someone from our post was outside the main building near sensitive equipment at a time when they should have been sleeping. Sarah studied the figure in the photograph, trying to make out identifying features, but the distance and image quality made it impossible to determine who it was. Could it have been someone on legitimate duty? She asked. I've checked the duty rosters and security logs. No one was scheduled to be in that area at that time, and the person in the photo appears to be doing something with the communication array, though we can't determine exactly what. The sound of footsteps in the corridor interrupted their conversation. Sergeant Thompson appeared in the doorway, his face set in hard lines. Captain, we've got a problem, he said urgently. The main communication array has been sabotaged. Someone cut specific wires overnight. We can receive messages, but can't transmit anything beyond basic emergency signals. Rodriguez cursed under his breath. The isolation of Eagle's Nest had just become potentially deadly. Without communication, they couldn't call for backup, coordinate with other units, or even report their situation to command. When was this discovered? Rodriguez asked. Corporal Johnson found it during his morning equipment check. The cuts were made very precisely, designed to disable our transmission capability while leaving receiving functions intact. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing. Sarah felt the walls of their situation closing in around them. The spy among them wasn't just passing information anymore. They were actively undermining the post's ability to defend itself or call for help. Can it be repaired? Rodriguez asked. Thompson shook his head. We don't have the right replacement parts. Johnson thinks he might be able to rig something temporary, but it would take hours and might not work reliably. Do it. And Thompson, I want you to personally supervise anyone who goes near that equipment. No one works on it alone. Yes, sir. After Thompson left, Rodriguez turned back to Sarah with an expression that was both determined and worried. Miss Mitchell, I need to ask you something, and I need you to think very carefully before you answer. Of course. During your time here, have you noticed anything unusual about any of the personnel? Behavior that seemed out of character, conversations that stopped when you approached, anything that struck you as odd? Sarah thought back over the months she had spent at Eagle's Nest, trying to recall details that might be significant. The soldiers had always been professional with her, friendly but maintaining appropriate boundaries. She had observed their routines, their personalities, their interactions with each other. Private Martinez has seemed more nervous than usual lately, she said slowly. But he's young and inexperienced. It could just be the stress of military service. What about his nervousness specifically? He's been asking more questions about medical procedures, emergency protocols. At first I thought he was just trying to learn, but some of his questions were oddly specific. Like he was trying to understand exactly how we would respond to different types of injuries or emergencies. Rodriguez made notes on a pad of paper. What else? Corporal Johnson has been working longer hours on the communication equipment. He said he was upgrading some systems, but I never saw any new equipment delivered, and he's been very protective of his work area, more so than usual. Anyone else? Sarah hesitated, not wanting to cast suspicion on people without good reason, but knowing that lives might depend on her observations. Sergeant Thompson has been taking walks outside the perimeter in the evenings. He said he was checking security, but it seemed unusual. And there was one night last week when I couldn't sleep, and I saw someone moving around outside around 3 in the morning. I couldn't tell who it was. That matches the time frame of the photograph, Rodriguez said grimly. What about the other soldiers? Most of them seem normal, but honestly, Captain, I'm not trained to spot spies or suspicious behavior. These men are all professionals. If one of them is betraying us, they would probably be good at hiding it. Rodriguez nodded, understanding the limitations of what Sarah could observe. You've been helpful. More than you know. A commotion in the corridor interrupted them again. This time it was multiple voices, raised in alarm. Rodriguez immediately moved toward the sound, with Sarah following close behind. They found several soldiers gathered around the entrance to the communications room, where Corporal Johnson was lying on the floor, unconscious and bleeding from a head wound. Private Martinez was kneeling beside him, checking for vital signs. What happened? Rodriguez demanded. I found him like this, Martinez replied, his voice shaking. He was working on the communication repairs. Someone must have attacked him. Sarah immediately moved to Johnson's side, opening her medical kit and beginning to assess his condition. The head wound was serious, but not immediately life-threatening. There was evidence of blunt force trauma, but his breathing and pulse were stable. He needs to be moved to my medical station for proper treatment, she told Rodriguez. Martinez, help me get him on a stretcher. As they carefully moved the unconscious communications specialist, Rodriguez examined the communications room. The equipment that Johnson had been working on was destroyed, smashed beyond any possibility of repair. Whoever had attacked him had made sure that their ability to contact the outside world was completely eliminated. Now we know our spy is getting desperate, Rodriguez said grimly. They're moving from passive intelligence gathering to active sabotage and violence. Once Johnson was stabilized in the medical station, Sarah began treating his head wound while Rodriguez questioned the other soldiers about their whereabouts when the attack occurred. The problem was that several of them had been alone at various times during the morning, making it impossible to establish alibis for everyone. Captain, Sarah said as she worked on Johnson's bandages, there's something else you should know. When I was treating his wound, I found something in his pocket. She handed Rodriguez a small piece of paper with what appeared to be coordinates written in pencil. The numbers were precise, indicating specific locations that could be anywhere in the surrounding mountain region. Rodriguez studied the paper carefully. These coordinates, they correspond to locations around our perimeter. Defensive positions, supply caches, observation points. Information that would be very valuable to an enemy surveillance team, Sarah observed. Yes, but the question is whether Johnson was providing this information to the enemy, or whether he discovered that someone else was and was attacked to prevent him from reporting it. The moral complexity of their situation was becoming more apparent by the hour. Everyone was a potential suspect, but also a potential victim. Trust had become a luxury they couldn't afford, yet they needed to work together to survive. As Sarah continued treating Johnson's injuries, she hoped he would regain consciousness soon and be able to provide answers about what had happened. But even if he could identify his attacker, that might not solve their larger problem. The spy among them had proven they were willing to use violence to protect their mission, and with their communications severed, Eagle's Nest was more isolated and vulnerable than ever. "Miss Mitchell," Rodriguez said quietly, "I want you to stay in the medical station with Johnson. Don't leave unless you're escorted by myself or Sergeant Thompson. And if anyone else tries to enter this room, call out immediately." "Do you think the spy will try to hurt Johnson again?" "I think our spy will do whatever is necessary to complete their mission and escape, and that makes everyone here expendable, including you." The weight of that statement settled over Sarah as she realized how drastically their situation had deteriorated. What had begun as a routine assignment helping soldiers at a remote outpost had become a deadly game of survival and deception. Somewhere among the men she had come to know and trust, an enemy was hidden, waiting for the right moment to complete whatever mission they had been sent to accomplish. As she sat beside the unconscious Johnson, monitoring his vital signs and listening to the tense conversations in the corridor outside, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that the worst was yet to come. The attack on Johnson suggested that their spy was under pressure to complete their mission quickly, which meant more violence was likely inevitable. Outside the medical station, she could hear Rodriguez organizing the remaining soldiers into security patrols and defensive positions. But how do you defend against an enemy who's already inside your walls, who knows your every move and weakness? Sarah didn't have military training, but even she could see that their situation was becoming desperate. The afternoon passed slowly, with Johnson drifting in and out of consciousness, but not yet coherent enough to answer questions about his attack. Sarah maintained her vigil beside him, checking his pupils for signs of concussion and monitoring his breathing and pulse. Medical training helped her focus on immediate tasks, but couldn't silence the growing fear that they were all in terrible danger. As evening approached, Rodriguez returned to the medical station with an expression that was somehow both grimmer and more determined than before. "Miss Mitchell," he said, "I've made some decisions about how we're going to handle this situation. Starting tonight, everyone will be confined to specific areas of the building. No one moves alone, and everyone will be accounted for at all times." "What about Johnson? He needs medical monitoring." "You'll continue caring for him, but Thompson will be stationed outside this room at all times. If Johnson regains consciousness and can tell us what happened, we might finally have the answers we need." Sarah nodded, understanding the logic even though the restrictions made her feel like a prisoner in the place she had considered a safe refuge for 8 months. "Captain," she said quietly, "what happens if we can't identify the spy? How long can we maintain this lockdown?" Rodriguez's expression was bleak. "I don't know, Miss Mitchell, but I do know that someone out there in the valley is waiting for information or a signal from their contact inside this post, and if they don't get what they're expecting, they're going to take more direct action." "You mean they'll attack the post directly?" "I mean they'll do whatever it takes to complete their mission or eliminate the evidence of their operation. Either way, we're running out of time." As night fell over Eagle's Nest for the second time since the crisis began, Sarah prepared herself for what might be their final chance to unmask the traitor among them. Johnson's condition was improving, and she hoped he would be able to speak soon and provide the crucial information they needed. But even as she clung to that hope, Sarah couldn't escape the growing certainty that their enemy wouldn't wait much longer to make their final move. The question that haunted her was whether they would be able to identify and stop the spy before it was too late for all of them. The third night at Eagle's Nest began with Corporal Johnson finally regaining full consciousness. Sarah was checking his pulse when his eyes opened clearly for the first time since the attack, focusing on her face with obvious confusion. "Doc," he said weakly, his voice hoarse. "What happened?" "My head feels like I got hit by a truck." "Someone attacked you in the communications room," Sarah explained gently. "You've been unconscious for most of the day. Can you remember anything about what happened?" Johnson tried to sit up but winced and lay back down. Sarah could see him struggling to piece together his memories, his forehead creasing with concentration. "I was working on the communication repairs," he said slowly, "trying to bypass the damaged circuits. I heard someone coming up behind me, thought it was Thompson or the captain, then nothing until now." "Did you see who it was? Even a glimpse?" "No, I was focused on the equipment. But Doc, there's something else. Something important." Johnson's voice became more urgent despite his weakness. "Before I was attacked, I found something that doesn't make sense." Sarah leaned closer, her heart racing. "What did you find?" The damage to the communications array wasn't just sabotage, it was specific. Whoever did it knew exactly which circuits to cut to disable our transmission while leaving our ability to receive certain frequencies intact. That takes specialized knowledge of our equipment. "What kind of frequencies?" "Short-range tactical frequencies. The kind used for close-range coordination between small units." Johnson paused, his face growing pale as the implications became clear. "Doc, I think someone was maintaining communication with the surveillance team in the valley. The sabotage wasn't meant to isolate us completely. It was meant to preserve their ability to coordinate with their contact inside the post." Sarah felt her blood run cold. This revelation changed everything about their situation. The spy wasn't just gathering intelligence, they were actively coordinating with an external enemy force. "Johnson, I need to get Captain Rodriguez immediately. Don't tell anyone else what you just told me until he gets here." "Wait, Doc, there's more. I also found this hidden in the equipment housing." Johnson reached into his pocket with obvious difficulty and pulled out a small electronic device that Sarah didn't recognize. "I think it's some kind of transmitter, but I'm not sure how it works." Before Sarah could respond, the lights in the medical station suddenly went out. Emergency lighting kicked in a few seconds later, bathing everything in an eerie red glow, but the main power had clearly been cut. "That's not good," Johnson whispered. Sarah moved to the door and called out for Sergeant Thompson, who was supposed to be standing guard in the corridor. There was no response. The building around them had become eerily quiet, without the usual sounds of soldiers moving around or equipment running. "Stay here," she told Johnson. "I'm going to find Captain Rodriguez." "Be careful, Doc. If the power's been cut deliberately, it means whoever our spy is, they're making their final move." Sarah grabbed a flashlight from her medical kit and carefully opened the door to the corridor. The emergency lighting cast strange shadows on the walls, making familiar spaces look foreign and threatening. She could see that Thompson's guard position was empty, with no sign of where he had gone. Moving as quietly as possible, Sarah made her way toward the command room where she hoped to find Rodriguez. The silence in the building was unnatural and frightening. Where was everyone? As she approached the command room, Sarah heard voices speaking in hushed tones. She recognized Captain Rodriguez's voice, but couldn't make out the words. Relief flooded through her at knowing he was safe, but caution made her approach slowly. "Can't risk any more delays," she heard someone saying. "The extraction team is in position, but they won't wait much longer." Sarah froze. The voice wasn't one she immediately recognized, and the words suggested something very wrong was happening. She pressed herself against the wall near the doorway, trying to hear more. "I understand the timeline," Rodriguez replied, his voice tense. "But we need to make sure there are no witnesses. The medic has been asking too many questions, and Johnson was getting close to discovering the truth." Sarah's world tilted on its axis. Captain Rodriguez, the man she had trusted, respected, and looked to for protection, was speaking like someone coordinating with enemies. Her mind raced, trying to process what she was hearing. "What about the others?" the unfamiliar voice asked. "They'll be dealt with. The explosion will make it look like an enemy attack succeeded. No one will question why there were no survivors." Explosion. The word hit Sarah like a physical blow. Rodriguez was planning to kill everyone at Eagle's Nest, including her. The man she had trusted with her safety was the spy, and he was preparing to eliminate all evidence of his betrayal. Moving as silently as possible, Sarah retreated from the command room. Her mind was reeling, but her training kicked in. She had to warn the others, had to find a way to stop whatever Rodriguez was planning. But first, she needed to understand how many people were involved and what resources she had to work with. As she made her way back toward the medical station, Sarah heard footsteps approaching from another direction. She ducked into an empty room and waited, holding her breath as someone passed by in the corridor. Through the crack in the door, she saw Private Martinez moving quickly toward the command room, carrying what appeared to be military-grade explosives. Martinez was working with Rodriguez. How many others were involved in this betrayal? Sarah's mind raced through the personnel at Eagle's Nest, trying to determine who could be trusted and who might be part of the conspiracy. When the corridor was clear, Sarah hurried back to the medical station where Johnson was waiting anxiously. "Doc, what's happening? I heard voices but couldn't tell what was going on." "Johnson, listen to me very carefully," Sarah said, her voice urgent but quiet. "Captain Rodriguez is the spy. He's working with Martinez and probably others. They're planning to blow up the post and kill everyone to cover their tracks." Johnson's eyes widened in shock. "That's impossible. The captain would never." "I heard him talking about it. They have explosives, and they're coordinating with the surveillance team in the valley for extraction." Sarah was trying to think clearly despite her fear. "We need to warn the others and find a way to stop them." "Who can we trust?" Johnson asked, his voice weak but determined. "I don't know for certain. Thompson was supposed to be guarding this room, but he's disappeared. He could be dead, captured, or part of the conspiracy." Johnson struggled to sit up despite his injuries. "Doc, there might be a way to contact the outside. The transmitter I found. If I can figure out how it works, maybe I can send a distress signal on a frequency that bypasses their sabotaged equipment." "Do you think you can do that in your condition?" "I have to try. It might be our only chance." While Johnson worked on the transmitter with shaking hands, Sarah tried to plan their next moves. They needed to find out how many soldiers were still alive and loyal, locate and disable the explosives if possible, and somehow survive long enough for help to arrive. A sound in the corridor made them both freeze. Footsteps were approaching the medical station, moving deliberately and making no effort at stealth. Sarah grabbed a scalpel from her medical kit. Not much of a weapon, but better than nothing. The door opened, and Sergeant Thompson stepped inside. His face was grim, and Sarah noticed that his uniform was torn, and he had what appeared to be dried blood on his sleeve. "Doc Johnson, thank God you're both alive," he said, his voice filled with relief. Sarah wasn't sure whether to trust him or not. "Thompson, where have you been? You were supposed to be guarding this room." "Rodriguez sent me on patrol about an hour ago. Said he had new intelligence about enemy movement. But it was a setup." Thompson's expression was angry and bitter. "I found 3 of our guys dead in the supply room. Rodriguez and Martinez are working with the enemy. And I think there might be others involved, too." "3 dead?" Sarah felt sick. These were men she had known and worked with for months. Stevens, Williams, and Parker, all shot execution style. Thompson's voice was hard with grief and rage. "Rodriguez is planning to blame it on an enemy assault, but I know what I saw." Johnson looked up from the transmitter he was working on. "Thompson, How many of us are left? As far as I know, just us three and maybe two others. Rodriguez has Martinez and at least one more soldier working with him. We're outnumbered and outgunned. Sarah made a decision. Thompson's story matched what she had overheard, and his anger seemed genuine. She had to trust someone, and Thompson had always been straightforward and protective of the unit's welfare. Thompson. Johnson found a transmitter that might let us contact the outside for help. And I overheard Rodriguez talking about explosives. They're planning to blow up the post and claim it was an enemy attack. Thompson cursed violently. Those bastards! 20 years I've served in this man's army, and they're going to murder us to cover up their treason. Can you help us stop them? Sarah asked. Doc, I'll die trying. These were good soldiers they killed. They trusted Rodriguez. Followed his orders right up until he put bullets in their heads. Johnson suddenly looked up from his work with excitement. I think I've got something. This transmitter is more sophisticated than I thought. It's not just for local communication, it can reach long-range frequencies. I might be able to contact our base command directly. Do it, Thompson said immediately. Even if they can't get help here in time, at least someone will know what really happened. As Johnson worked to establish contact, Sarah tried to think about their tactical situation. Rodriguez and his conspirators controlled most of the post and had superior firepower, but they also needed to maintain the appearance of an enemy attack, which might limit their actions somewhat. Thompson, do you know where they've placed the explosives? I saw Martinez carrying charges toward the main support structure and the communication room. If they bring down the main building, it would look like artillery or rocket fire from the valley. How much time do we have? I don't know. But Rodriguez was talking about the extraction team not waiting much longer. I think they're under pressure to complete their mission soon. Johnson suddenly held up his hand for silence. I'm getting something, he said, adjusting dials on the transmitter. This is Eagle's Nest to Base Command, emergency priority, do you copy? After a few tense seconds, a voice crackled through the static. Eagle's Nest, this is Base Command. You've been dark for over 12 hours. Report your status. Base Command, this is Corporal Johnson. We have a code red situation. Hostile infiltration of post leadership. Multiple personnel down. Request immediate emergency response. Johnson, clarify your report. Are you saying you're under enemy attack? Negative. Base Command. Captain Rodriguez and possibly other personnel are foreign agents. They have killed at least 3 soldiers and are planning to destroy the post with explosives to cover their tracks. There was a long pause before the response came. Eagle's Nest. That's a very serious accusation. Are you certain of your intelligence? Confirmed, Base Command. We have witnessed evidence of treason and murder. Request immediate military police and tactical response team. Understood, Eagle's Nest. Emergency response is being dispatched. ETA approximately 2 hours. Maintain position and await assistance. Thompson looked grim. 2 hours is a long time. We need to survive that long, and we need to prevent Rodriguez from destroying the evidence of what happened here. Sarah felt a surge of hope mixed with determination. Help was coming, but they had to stay alive long enough for it to arrive. What's our plan? First, we need to find and disable those explosives, Thompson said. Then we try to stay hidden and avoid confrontation until help arrives. We're not equipped for a firefight against trained soldiers. Johnson was looking pale but determined. I can move if I have to. This head injury isn't going to stop me from seeing justice done for our dead friends. Before anyone could respond, they heard voices and footsteps in the corridor outside. Someone was approaching the medical station, and from the sound of it, there were several people. Everyone stay quiet, Thompson whispered, moving toward the door with his sidearm drawn. Let's see who's coming to visit. The voices became clearer as they approached. Sarah recognized Rodriguez's voice giving orders, but there were at least 2 other people with him. They stopped directly outside the medical station door. Check the medical station, Rodriguez said. If the medic and Johnson are alive, they need to be eliminated before the demonstration begins. Sarah's heart pounded as she realized their hiding place had been discovered. Thompson positioned himself beside the door, ready to fight, while Johnson struggled to his feet despite his injuries. Sarah gripped her scalpel, knowing it was inadequate but unwilling to give up without a fight. The door handle turned slowly, and Sarah prepared for what might be their final confrontation with the traitors who had destroyed the peace and safety of Eagle's Nest. But as the door opened, Thompson moved with the skill of a 20-year veteran, tackling the first person through the doorway and causing enough confusion for Johnson to grab a medical instrument as a weapon and Sarah to position herself to help however she could. The fight was brief but intense. Thompson's experience and determination, combined with the desperate courage of people fighting for their lives, proved more effective than superior numbers. When the struggle ended, Rodriguez lay unconscious on the floor. Martinez was restrained with medical tape, and the third conspirator, Private Hendricks, who Sarah had never suspected, was nursing a broken nose but securely subdued. "Search them for detonation devices," Thompson ordered as he caught his breath. "If they were planning to blow this place up, they'll have remote triggers." Sarah found what appeared to be an electronic controller in Rodriguez's pocket, while Johnson discovered detailed maps showing the placement of explosive charges throughout the building. "We need to find and disable these charges," Thompson said, studying the maps. "Even with Rodriguez captured, there might be timers or backup detonation methods." Over the next hour, working carefully with Johnson's technical expertise and Thompson's military experience, they located and safely disabled the explosive devices that would have brought down Eagle's Nest and killed everyone inside. As dawn broke over the mountain, the sound of helicopters approaching from the valley announced the arrival of the emergency response team. Sarah stood at the window of the medical station, watching the aircraft land and disgorge military police and investigators who would sort out the full extent of the conspiracy that had nearly cost them all their lives. The investigation that followed revealed that Rodriguez had been recruited as a foreign asset years earlier, using his position to gather intelligence on American military operations in the region. Martinez and Hendricks had been blackmailed into cooperation through threats against their families. The surveillance team in the valley was captured the same day, along with equipment and documents that provided evidence of a broader espionage network that had been operating for years. Sarah remained at Eagle's Nest through the investigation, providing medical care for the survivors and testimony about the events she had witnessed. The isolation and beauty of the mountain post would never feel the same to her, but she took comfort in knowing that justice had been served and that the sacrifice of the murdered soldiers had not been in vain. Months later, when Sarah received a commendation for her role in exposing the conspiracy and helping to save lives, she thought about the question that had started it all. Who fired that bullet? The answer had led them down a path of betrayal and violence that none of them could have anticipated. But it had also revealed the courage and loyalty that existed among the soldiers who truly served their country with honor. In the end, that made all the difference between survival and tragedy, between justice and the success of those who would sell their souls for foreign gold. The bullet that had started everything had been fired by an enemy sniper, but the real enemies had been hiding in plain sight, wearing the same uniforms as those they betrayed. Sarah learned that day that the greatest threats sometimes come from within, but so too does the greatest courage to stand against them.